Facilities budget.
Good evening. We're here for the Thursday, October 12th Committee of the Whole meeting to discuss the budget. And the first item would be the roll call.
Bartlett.
Here.
Hirsch.
Here.
Middleton.
Here.
Swadley.
Here.
Majewski.
Here.
Engelberger.
Here.
Jensen.
Here.
O'Connor.
Here.
Olson. Here. Borisma, Johnson, Reeves, and Truel are all absent and excused, so we have 8 alders and the mayor present tonight.
Okay, thank you, Lana, and thank you for making sure we had a quorum tonight. The first item on the agenda then for new business would be the approval of the October 5th, 2017 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes.
I move.
There's a motion by Majewski
Second.
and a second by O'Connor. Any discussion on the minutes from the last Committee of the Whole? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Item number 2 is we're going to continue with the review of the 2018 general fund budget. And it looks like we're going to start out with the senior center. Welcome.
Hello. How are you? As every year, the senior center budget is not very complex. We have, most of our budget is staff salaries. We have obviously some supplies, we have some continuing ed monies, we have some utilities, but those are staying fairly static. The one request that we had made of this year is to increase our program and volunteer coordinator to a full-time status. Currently, they are part-time, and all of that, the support for the part-time that we have right now comes from a grant. So currently, the city is paying nothing into that person's salary. So our request was to take that to full-time, and the city would then increase or start supporting that position. I believe if you look on the bubble graph, it's about $37,000, almost $38,000. Our reasoning for doing that is as we want to increase the usage of the senior center, it makes only sense that we have someone who can spend some more time looking at researching different programs, different events, different people to collaborate with, different spaces, because we are running out of space at the senior center, so we need to research other spaces in our community that we can hold events and programs at. So it is staff time that we are needing, as well as for our volunteer group, more time to recruit more volunteers, to supervise them, retain more volunteers, so we make sure that we're doing a good job there. Currently, our position, as I said, is just under 20 hours a week.
Does anybody have any questions or comments they'd like to make about the senior center budget request? Hearing none, I guess we'll move on to the next one,
Okay.
which is the transfers, and who will be doing the transfers?
That would be me.
Okay.
I've got it up on the screen. There was no change to contingency. The transfer to debt, we saw an increase of $286,100 in debt. Transfer to capital, those were the transfers to the equipment replacement fund and capital outlay. We kept them the same level as in 17 for $419,500. Transfer to the library, we increased that number slightly based on expenditures by $3,830. And transfer to the Opera House, We currently fund 2 positions at the Opera House, and that number increased approximately $740. And then we have an account called Transfer to Others, and that's a combination of several accounts. One being the Public Safety Building. We saw an increase of about $4,200 in costs for cleaning services. The Landmarks Commission or Committee had requested an extra $1,000, a $5,000 request for 2018. So that's 1,000 of that 15,200. And then we also looked at placing $10,000 into the Economic Development Fund. And that summarizes the transfers to other funds. Any questions?
Does anybody have any questions? I do.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Economic Development Fund and what?
I actually have a slide that I'm going to show you later that shows the breakdown.
Well, I guess that answers that question.
Yeah.
All right, I'll look forward to that. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, thank you. And the next item would be the Opera House.
We're going to ask if library can go first. Richard has a commitment at the library.
Oh, is that okay
So-
with you, Bill? Oh, yeah. Okay.
And everybody received a handout that was an updated revised library budget for this evening.
Thank you. I thought I'd start by reviewing the library budget process a little bit because it's a little bit different from some of the other departments. I start out making a draft budget which goes to the library board finance committee, and that would have happened in the late summer. And since I had some requests for some additional staff hours, it would have gone to the library board personnel committee too, except they had a joint finance and personnel committee meeting. From there, the budget goes to the library board, and it's actually gone to the library board at a number of their meetings because as the months go by, I learn more about what the exact costs would be that we get from SCLS and other of our vendors. So this year's budget, we have a little increase in revenue that we're talking about from fines. We want to get to the point where we can take credit cards over the front desk. So if you owe the library money right now, you can pay online with a credit card, but not over the front desk. So thanks to help from our new IT director and our new finance director, we're going to get that started, I hope, yet this year. We have quite a few members of the public that come and want to pay us something, and they say, would you take plastic over the front desk? And we have to disappoint them. And so we hope that that will bring in some more revenue. We also have a decrease in revenue from Dane County. Our typical Dane County that we get over the years is usually pretty close to $220,000. We had a big increase for 2016, and then there was a decrease back closer to normal in 2017, and there's a decrease for 2018. That money is based on usage from Dane County residents. As far as the actual operating budget, things are pretty close to what they were. We've got a few increases. We've got some cuts we made. I think if you just look at the operating part, it's $200 or $300 more for next year than this year. And then I work with our HR department and finance department for personnel costs. We check to make sure that we have the right number of hours in for our staff, and then they figure out the exact costs from there. So that's kind of how our process goes. We have on the bubble diagram, there's some numbers that might look a little unusual, but we allocated, kind of reallocated money just to try to get this to match the reality of things a little better. I suppose I should mention one of our biggest operating line items, and that's the technology costs at $48,900. That's money that we pay for the most part to the South Central Library System. It covers our participation in the LinkCat, the library system. It also covers our PC support and our share of the system infrastructure and also network services, including our wireless. Also licenses for our self-check machines. Another item, a line item that we have that no one else has, is the e-resources, the electronic resources. That's the e-books and also e-magazines and also our databases. So that's been going up a little bit every year. Usage is getting more, and so that's something that we're happy to offer to the public. So we also pay a little bit more each year to offer more copies of electronic materials. It kind of sounds strange to talk about copies of electronic materials, because if you have a file on your computer, you can make as many copies as you want, but for ebooks, there's something called digital rights management. And so that limits the number of times a library can check out an ebook. So sometimes it might be 20 times, it might be 50 times, it depends on the company. So those, just like a print book kind of falls apart after a while, then the digital rights management prevents us from using those forever. So questions I could answer if I kind of covered everything.
I have Alderperson O'Connor.
Yeah, hi, Richard. Could you talk a little bit about the ongoing attendance on Sundays?
I don't have those statistics with me. I know that when we last checked, library attendance on Sundays was holding pretty steady. We've started to do Sunday programs, which brings in more people. We have our Sunday yoga. We've got Liquid Courage coming up later this year. That's a barbershop quartet.
That's different than we were thinking.
Right. Madison Classical Guitar Society, but we've been doing some of these programs on Sundays now, and that brings in more people also. So I'll be able to answer that question more accurately in probably another month or so.
I was just wondering,
Yeah.
the general impression.
Alderperson Engelberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Richard, just a question. What is the total that the city taxpayers put into the budget?
It looks like it would be this the 823,126.
Of course, that's supported by revenues through revenues.
Well, I'm talking about Stoughton city taxpayers.
Coming from the levy directly,
Yeah,
$571,577.
everything else comes from outside sources.
Correct.
Right, Dane County, and I forgot to mention that we also get money from other counties, surrounding counties. So when residents of Rock County, for example, or even ones that aren't surrounding, like Sauk County, when they come and use our library, and it does happen, then we get funding from those counties, and that's typically just under $10,000. We're looking at $9,107 for next year.
Any further questions for the library? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
All right, that takes us to the Opera House unless somebody else wants to go first.
So, hi everybody. If you look at the Opera House budget, there's really been no substantial changes between last year and this year, but I can entertain questions.
Short and sweet. Anybody have any questions, or how's the season going so far?
It's going really well. We have consistently set a record for first day ticket sales every season, the last 10 years running. So I didn't really think we could break the record again this year, but we did. So, which is good and bad because now we have to try again next year. But so far so good. We have probably our season's biggest show coming up next week, which is Winona Judd. So there'll be a bunch of buses and Winona fans cruising around on Main Street next week, Saturday. so far so good, and I think we're going to be on par with where we were last year. So.
Excellent. Alderperson Mieski?
Bill, I was just wondering, you did a reorganization of your staff, and I'm wondering how is that working out? Do you foresee any more changes or wanting to tweak that at all?
It's working out really, really well, actually. It was the silver lining of Christina Dahlhausen's departure was that we had boxed up a lot of different activities into one position, which really wasn't a replaceable position because the skill set was too varied. So we split that up and we're able to bring one person up a little bit and then have her position slightly diminished in terms of the costs associated with it and just reassign jobs. And that's worked really well. Worked better than I could have hoped for. The one thing that I would like to think about trying to figure out a way to fund going into the future, and I'm already working on that, is more part-time help in the area of things like lighting and stage support and stuff like that.
Thanks.
So, anybody else have it? Alderperson Jensen?
Thank you. Bill, could you just give us a quick explanation on 502, why the reduction of 42,000?
So I couldn't quite catch the question.
The reduction of 43,000 on item 502?
I still couldn't.
Say the number
Greg, you gotta
again,
go in
please,
the
Greg.
microphone.
Item 502, manage as performance venue, a reduction of 43,000. Just give us a little brief on that.
Oh,
Shows. Has to do with the number of shows.
oh, right. Yeah, that's just, every year it'll be in flux based on how many shows we book compared to how much, and so the revenues, expenditures are always offsetting each other. So we might spend a little less and hopefully make more than that, or, they're constantly offsetting each other.
Does it have anything to do with your year being in the middle of our fiscal year?
No, because we box all that money up into a fund that doesn't open up until 2018, so.
Yeah, Bill explained it best to me when he said it not only has to do with the numbers of shows that they have each year or differing from year to year, but the complexity of those shows that differ.
So I had another question for you. Has anybody ever calculated the economic impact that a show has on a given day from the Opera House?
Not on any particular given day. There is a recent study that comes out, I think, about once every 5 years, and it was done by Arts America, I believe, is the group that does it. It's called the Prosperity 5 study. And that just came out recently. It targeted Dane County in particular with numbers for economic development to try to draw a correlation between ticket buyers who come from outside of town and how much money they spend on average in a variety of different areas not related to the purchase of the ticket, and then people from in town, and then how you can relate those expenses directly. And then there's also a more complex tool that has to do with how many full-time equivalent positions in your community are supported by the influx of people into the community in terms of people who are working at the restaurants or people who are working at the shops on Main Street during the shows. And we've been working for a while on trying to come up with a concrete number on that, but if you just look at the non-ticket spending in town and don't take into account the other economic impacts, it's somewhere around $500,000 a year in economic impact outside of purchasing of tickets. Other stuff is like, well, if you have a business that's running and they're serving food to people and staying in business because of shows, you have the economic impact of the taxes that they pay as a result. And so it also splits it out further in state taxes versus local taxes and stuff like that. The Opera House Board, as well as the Friends Association, have been working on getting me to get a presentation together to talk about that exact subject. So,
Okay, yeah, if you could share that with us when you get to that point, that would be very interesting. I know, at least for myself, there's a desire for you to be able to increase the number of shows, so I'm always interested to see what the benefits of that would be, and obviously, you know, whether or not you have the capacity to do that with your current staffing, or what it would take as a community for us to be able to support more shows.
And it's always been a criticism that I've gotten from my coworkers at the Opera House, as well as people in my life, that why do I keep scheduling more events? But it does kind of lend itself to imagining all sorts of different possibilities of where it can go in the community. I think part of that goes towards the Arts Council and trying to continue developing the Arts District and different kinds of events that draw people to town and focus on the quality of life issues from a cultural, arts standpoint, in addition to the business and residential development aspects of economic development. So, I mean, I think it's really exciting to imagine the possibilities, but I think we probably are at capacity at this point.
Thank you. Anybody else? Alderperson Bartlett?
Yeah, in the line item budget, it shows that ticket sales are estimated to be down for this year compared to last year. But there's, am I correct, there's more shows, or why are ticket sales looking to be less?
Well, part of it could be just the cost of the tickets themselves. We may, and I have to apologize, I don't have my projection sheet for each of the shows for the whole season, but I think we had more shows that were in excess of $70, say, per ticket last year, and those numbers can quickly stack up. So I think our prices are probably more reasonable this year. But on the flip side, you would see that the guarantees would be slightly less for the performers who are coming in, so we're not paying as much, but so it kind of evens out. Our ticket sales projections for the year are pretty much the same, which is about 20,000 tickets for the season, or for the year, because it basically splits down the middle. So.
Anything else, or Alderperson Engelberger?
Thank you. Either Bill or Tammy, same question. What portion comes out of taxes and Stoughton taxes, and what portion other?
It's about 18% of our revenues comes from the city. What?
171?
Yeah, that's what we call our city subsidy. So it amounts to 18%.
Has that percentage gone down the last few years, or up?
Last few years, it's been the same. We're
Ever so well.
Just a slight increase for
16.
18.
Yeah, I guess between 16 and 17 it went up a bit, but part of that was that whole reorganization of the staff situation. Basically, right now we're paying for, out of the 245 fund, 100% of one full-time position, and then the city's paying 100% of two full-time positions out of the general fund, which is where that 171 comes from. I'd like to say that ultimately it's our goal to reduce that 171 to a lesser contribution from the general fund. But on the other hand, I'd like to say that if we were able to raise more funds through increased revenues, that it would make more sense to try to continue to build up the backbone of the Opera House first before we look at trying to reduce that money. I think it's money well spent, and I think it's on par with what people typically are spending in other communities. If you look at the amount of money that, say, Madison spends out of their budget on the Overture Center, I mean, you're getting a good deal, even in terms of percentages.
Yeah, I wouldn't like to see the dollar amount go down. I wouldn't mind seeing the percentages go down.
For the other communities?
No, for us.
For us, it's
Having at least the same amount of revenue from the city, but having overall revenue go up.
oh yeah, for sure.
And I just wanted to ask you, are you finding yourself any additional time with the hiring of the IT director?
Definitely. Not a ton, because really I think the reality of the situation leading up to having the IT department was that, and I don't think this was just in the Opera House, I think it was throughout several different departments. I mean, the obvious ones would be planning department being in charge of IT, and the Opera House being in charge of media services. But I think there's it peppers around to basically all the different departments that we all have little pieces that have been taken off our plates and taken up by John. And so I wouldn't say that it opens up an entire new world of time, but it certainly loosens it up enough that I feel like there's the potential for thinking about new ideas and opening up new revenue streams.
Thank you. Anything else? Otherwise, you're free to go.
Thanks.
Thanks, Bill.
And next, we're going to talk about the EMS budget.
Last page. Hello. Not much for change here. We had some increases, we had some decreases. Probably the biggest adjustment we have is gonna be to revenue. If we stay on par, for calls where we are right now, we'll exceed last year, not by much, but by a little bit. Our overall revenues, billable revenues, are going to be about $1.25 million. Of that we'll capture, we're looking at 620 with an additional 10 that was added after the mayor and I had met. I believe that's completely feasible. There's some estimated increases in wages dependent on what's decided. We had a little bit of an increase in our employee benefits. Some decreases in operational expenses. Next page. I guess the next biggest thing is going to be the interest charges on our debt service. And then a little additional funding to the sinking fund for equipment replacement, which is going to be needed given the outdated technology that we're going to see with our radios, computer systems, and some HVAC issues that are going to need to be addressed in the next couple of years. But other than that, nothing huge.
Any questions for EMS? Alderperson Bartlett?
Yes, what was the reason for the extra 10,000 that was added later?
For revenue? Just a reanalysis. The general way to figure this out is revenue to date divided by how many months we've gone through times how many months are in the year. So there could be like 2 months between the time I wrote this and we actually met. So it gives you a little more data to go on. So that's how we come up with that.
Increased runs, would that have something to do with it?
Yeah, well,
Calls.
yeah.
So I have a question about the debt service.
Sure.
That's for buildings, equipment, vehicles, all the above, or?
No, debt service is only for the cost of the remodel.
Okay, which is scheduled to retire
2020.
2020?
We're getting there.
Yeah, we're getting close. So what is your plan at that point? Are you gonna, you're gonna continue to, you're gonna put that money in a sinking fund, or is that gonna come off the books, or what's the plan?
Right now, my capital expense plan is written through 2021. I haven't gone any further than that. When that time comes, will we have more funding than ever before? Yeah, to like $134,000 a year. That's also 4 years from now. I can tell you with some certainty that 4 years from now, I will be sitting here telling you that I'm going to need to hire people. There is no other service in Dane County that's running 1,750 calls with stipend volunteers. We're about the only ones.
Is it the number of calls or the distance?
It's the number of calls and daytime help. Everybody on our service has a job, and 80% of them work during the day. So thank goodness we have some retired individuals. We have people that can leave their job in town here and come take ambulance calls. Big shout out to Scotland for that. But it's not getting any better.
I hope our ad made it in the Hub today. I haven't got a copy of it yet, but for the first time, we are openly advertising for stipend volunteers. Since we haven't done it in 15 years, I don't know how it's going to go over. I'm wishing for the best, calling on our community members. It was specifically written for our community, those that are interested. But I think I'd be foolish to say that 4 years from now, I think we can maintain this with a volunteer base.
So that gets into some other questions I wanted to ask.
Sure.
And they're kind of HR questions. So what is your relationship with the HR? Are you working with them when you're hiring people, or you do your own thing, or how does that work?
Oh, no, Amy Jo absolutely helps. For example, this is the first time that we've done formal help wanted. I wrote an ad, took it up, we looked at it. She made a suggestion or two, redid a little bit, and sent it out. Our bylaws state that our personnel director has the role and position and job of conducting interviews. So those are something we've always done in-house. HR has come into play for us in the last couple of years in some disciplinary matters. Just went up and got help today for, I'll call it a non-hiring issue. So absolutely, I rely on them quite a bit. They set up all our new employees, W-2s, I-9s, banking, physicals. They take care of all that. And that's stuff I used to do in-house before we had an actual HR department.
Okay.
So very grateful.
And it sounds like, as far as the help, it sounds similar to what I heard from the fire chief, and I don't know if you collaborate or how that, if you brainstorm together to try to come up with some strategies, or?
Mm-hmm. We've been fortunate over, since I've been here, word of mouth is what has afforded us our volunteers up until this point. I think it's pretty incredible to go 15 years without a formal plea to the community, and simply word of mouth brings in volunteers. So we've been very, very lucky, very fortunate. So I'm really interested to see what comes of this plea. I'll keep you updated.
All right. Alderperson O'Connor.
How many vacancies do you have out of the staff volunteers, of how many?
Technically, we don't have any. I think that Scott alluded to he has an authorized force. We don't. That we have no set parameters for numbers. What I look at is how many of our volunteers are potentially being overutilized, and how many people do we need to bring on to curve what I would call an overutilization of a volunteer. So what number is that right now? I'm looking at 10. We sit right now at 40. We've been between 36 and 43 for the entire time I've been on. But people are busier than ever. And whereas somebody may have in the past been able to give 500 hours, 400 hours, now they might be, sliding down a little bit, and I understand that. It's completely understandable.
And these are paid positions?
These are stipend positions.
Okay.
So what that means is that every time someone answers a response to a page, they get paid. They do not get paid anything to wait for that call. So we have days, we average 6 calls a day, which is up from just a couple of years ago. It was, a little over 3 3/4. We have days where we might not have any calls, and the next day we'll have 12. There's no rhyme or reason. So I have people dedicating large amounts of time. They're not getting paid a dime. They're sitting and waiting and waiting. But it all comes out in the wash.
And is that processed through the city's payroll then, or do you do it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we pay $18,000, I believe, to the city administrative fees.
That's right.
Where are they?
See it now either.
13. Nope, not there. Here it is, administrative expense. $18,000 a year to City Hall for HR support, which would include, administering the insurance for Jim and I, and our pay, the volunteer stipends, the longevity pay, payment of bills, receiving miscellaneous funds, things like that.
Thanks. Alderperson Hirsch.
Just out of curiosity, so when you have new volunteers, do you train them, or do they have to come in and be already trained?
Nope,
All the skills?
we train. Formal training is, at first, a 1-semester course at MATC, 180 hours. That's the beginning. We like to get them a little experience then, and then we send them back to school for some advanced training, which is another semester course of 180 hours.
Thank you.
Yes.
Alderperson Engelberger.
Thank you. Same question to Tammy. How much city money goes into the EMS total?
Currently, the only transfer is the $80,000.
What about the debt service, the truck, and the equipment replacement?
Nope, that's all outside of, they collect funds in their own EMS truck fund, so that's what goes to pay for, say, the new ambulance that just got, was going to be bought.
That's not city tax dollars?
Oh, I guess you could call it that.
Well, that's what I'm
The
asking.
$80,000 is transferred into the
Into the
pot
fund.
of revenue,
Right.
and then divvied up into operations, equipment replacement, and vehicle
My
replacement.
question is, the 750,357 is the total, right?
Yep,
And then
expenditures.
is it the 155 plus 80? That is city taxpayer dollars in the EMS, or what is it?
You can hardly hear them.
I'm not sure what that means.
You said, is it the what, the one?
155,000 plus the 80,000, is that the?
No,
Michael,
those are expenses. The 100, the 30,000, the 25 are expense lines.
If you look up in the revenue section, it's right at the beginning of Fund 603. You'll see the very first line is state Medicare supplement.
Yep.
Then there's a transfer in general fund. That's the $80,000 that the levy transfers into the EMS for operations.
So it's 80,000 is total.
That's
That's
my
the total.
understanding. Yeah.
Does
That is the
include
total.
Townships?
What's that?
Townships are billed separately, and those funds are in the,
Then the 610, right?
Yep.
42,511.
42,511.
That's it.
It's in the revenue section.
Well, it says fire department fees. That's,
It's
obviously,
a mislabel
Yeah,
from
it's
years
actually
ago.
department
Oh,
fees.
okay.
We'll have to fix that.
So there's 5 lines of revenue.
Right.
So where does the CIP fit in?
The CIP, they're treated differently. They don't really, they have their own CIP, but they also have their own fund that, I don't want to say collects money, but reserves funds for future purchase of capital items.
your CIP are these two.
Okay, and what's the 603 fund?
The 603 fund is just the EMS operations account. The actual fund that has the other funds set aside, Fund 227, that's for EMS truck, and Fund 228, that's for the EMS equipment fund. So I'd have to get you the detail on that.
No longer have a quorum.
Leave it with the mayor.
Do we have a quorum?
Mayor
Huh?
doesn't count the quorum for committee of the whole.
Uh-oh.
Well, I think, let's just count real quick. I think we still have quorum, I count.
Part of the committee,
Yeah.
the whole, you count for the quorum.
Yes, the mayor.
Yeah, for the cow she counts.
Yep,
That's new to me.
thank you. I didn't notice that he left.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One over half?
Yeah,
Committee
it's on
meeting's not a council
6:40.
meeting.
He looked pretty.
This isn't a council meeting. Committee meeting. Need one more than that. As far as I know.
Michael, did that help to answer your question? I mean, I can get you guys the
Okay.
details on what's available in both of those funds currently.
I'm going to want to look at it overall, total dollars the city spends on city taxpayer money and total altogether. There's two different things there.
Okay.
And it's really confusing when you look at these sheets, as far as I'm concerned. Maybe it isn't to others, I don't know.
I don't think so. We can follow up with you on that, Michael. I understand what you're asking.
Alderperson Bartlett.
There been any instances of call demands that can't be met, and what happens in that case if there's not enough volunteers available? Is it
Sure.
Dane County or?
Sure. We have every community has what's called a mutual aid agreement. So once our resources have been tapped and we can no longer supply staffing, the next available community will come and respond. Likewise, we will do the same for them. That's why they're all called mutual. So it happens countywide.
You had to call on them at all this year?
Oh, sure.
Plenty of time?
Sure.
Okay.
Just as we've been to other communities as well.
Okay. And then, could you also touch on the utility expense went up about 18–19%? That's a lot more than utility rates went up. I'm just curious why the utilities went up.
It did.
And the
I was
replacement costs.
sitting back here going, huh. We did add carpet cleaning into that, which historically we not do that before. I just put carpet cleaning into an operational, general operating expense. So I did move that in. If you've never been down there, we have a lot of carpet. So that's quite the expense.
And I don't think they brush off their shoes when they come in after.
No.
They could work on
But
that.
we do that twice a year. We're trying to get some longevity out of our carpet since there is so much of it.
And that was in the utility cost or the replacement cost?
No, I put that in utilities.
Okay.
On my copy, it comes off, it says utilities/building maintenance.
Okay.
So I'm not sure why it doesn't quite say that on this one.
Put out here. Now, what were the replacement costs, the additional 15,000 that went up? Transfer to equipment replacement?
Oh. And that's the makeup that we're trying to
It's
do.
on page 20 of the mayor's line
Yep,
item.
yep.
Yep.
So as I wrote the capital budget out, let me back up. Every year, we take $10,000 of our revenues out of the 6 revenue categories, and we sink it into a fund called equipment replacement. We take $30,000 and sink it into the truck replacement fund. There was an increase after the mayor and I spoke about all the things that are coming up into the equipment replacement fund. So when our radios next year need to all be replaced, when all of our computers need to be replaced, when the HVAC system needs to be replaced, the money's actually there. Because $10,000 a year for large ticket items does not add up very quickly.
How much is in those budgets then now, those funds you're saving up?
There's $268,000 in the truck fund, and there is 46,000 in the equipment replacement fund. I'd have to double check that number.
And how much does an ambulance cost when you get a new one?
On it,
Because you're just getting one, right?
209,000 is the base cost of the ambulance that I hope to bring to finance. Hopefully it happens in the next 2 weeks. 209,000 is the base.
Okay.
So then there'll be a little money left to start seeding for the next. So every 5 years, ambulances get replaced. The oldest one out then will be 15 years old.
Okay, thank you.
Alderperson O'Connor.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up to Matt's question, I understand mutual aid when you may have more calls and you have staff available. Are there hours in the day that are not staffed to begin with?
No. No, absolutely not.
Alderperson Hirsch.
I have a general question, because you brought it up with, you put some money or an expense into utilities. I guess it kind of brought up not a red flag, but I was just kind of curious with all the budgets, and maybe this is actually directed to Tammy. With all the budgets, there's a line item with utilities. What does that really entail?
Our gas and electric and water.
So we're actually paying gas, electric, and water, but then you also you put carpet cleaning into utilities, which would probably be more maintenance or repair.
Because on my budget, since I started doing this, mine says utility/building maintenance. So anything that I need to do to maintain the building goes into that category when I sit down and start to do the numbers.
Okay.
So it's truly not a whole, this is what we spent only on lighting, gas, and water.
Okay.
There's other things in there.
Is that normal for all the other departments too?
I'd have to look. I'm not
No,
certain. I
Rodney
think
usually
most other
budgets
ones.
for those, I'm sorry, Tammy, Rodney usually budgets for those, and he
Yeah, the
can,
utilities are generally separate, so if you see a utility line in the rest of the budgets for like the public safety building or the library, that's utility costs.
Now, because we have a utility company, why are we paying utilities? I mean,
We're not exempt from utilities.
Okay.
Yeah, everyone
I
has
know
to pay.
heating, our utility doesn't for gas, but if we own the company, so we're paying.
Yeah, no, we still, because they're their own entity, their own enterprise, they rely on everyone to pay for the service that they provide, even the city.
Okay.
we pay like everybody else, but they pay us back as, in a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes.
Okay.
I think we turn out okay on that deal.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions for EMS? Otherwise, thank you for all the information.
Sure.
Item number 6 is the stormwater budget. Who would like to do that tonight?
I'll give you just a cursory overview.
Okay.
I think the long and the short of the stormwater budget is encouraging. You can see in the upper right-hand corner of the page that was provided, and if you can slide over just a little bit more to the right. So I'll go to the end goal, or the end result first. The essence is the stormwater utility rate went up 4 cents per ERU per month, which is a very attractive, modest increase. You can see previously from 2013, it started at $4.44 per month per ERU. It's now at $5.11, where in last year it was 5.07. So this really correctly allocates some of the staff expenditures or staff hours, street department, public works, planning. All of those allocations of time were properly tracked and put into the stormwater utility accordingly. So I think this is very reflective of the actual cost to operate the stormwater utility.
Any questions or anything else you're presenting?
If there's questions.
Well, we have the detailed breakdown too on the budget itself, which is attached to the information you received. There's a 2-page document that lays out all of the various costs that make up the rates on the prior page.
Okay, so Alderperson Engelberger and then...
Just a question on this. Remember when we passed this, I don't know, what, 4 years ago or whatever, something like that?
I'm sorry, what?
When we passed this 4 or 5 years ago,
Yes.
when we implemented this, if I remember right, it wasn't part of the tax levy? Or was it?
This removed it from the tax levy. These expenses were charged as part of the levy. Now they're part of a utility rate structure.
I mean, we were paying, we were just eating it basically prior to that, and now we charge for it, but it's not part of the tax levy, right?
This is not part of the tax levy, that's correct. Recall, a lot of the premise related to it is more of a user fee. It represents the impact on the system based on the impervious area of each parcel that's been measured and calculated, and it's properly allocated accordingly. Instead of having large taxable entities that may not have, or for example, non-taxable entities that have large impervious areas, previously didn't contribute at all into the tax base, but provided an impact to the stormwater system. They're captured as part of this rate structure.
Alderperson O'Connor.
What's the definition of an ERU again?
Equivalent runoff unit. So this was calculated, every ERU, which really equates to the average impervious area per residential parcel. It's 3,105 square feet, I think, is kind of the mathematical equivalent to that.
Any other? Alderperson Bartlett.
Curious, Rodney, on the wages operations, it increased, well, it was around 90,000 for a number of years, then it went up to 105 and 107 and then back down. What was the reason for that, going back down another 15,000?
I think Public Works has been tracking their time much more accurately and I think that was also reflected in some of the personnel allocations that Public Works described to you previously as part of their budget. And I think that's an imperative that we do that, especially for the ratepayers, track our time accordingly so they're only being charged for the time that we spend in it.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Anybody else? Alderperson Hirsch.
I'm just curious, because this is the first time, I guess I'm trying to understand this. So each house, you calculated the ERU based on their house footprint and like their driveway and sidewalk, or who actually did all the calculation?
We actually had an engineering firm assist with us. So what we did is for that took a representative sampling throughout the city of all single-family homes. So I think they surveyed, I'm going to say 400 with very detailed mapping to identify the amount of impervious area on each of those parcels. Then we took an average of that, which is this 3,105 square feet. Now for commercial sites, you may have 30,000 square feet of impervious area, so you'll end up with approximately 10 ERUs.
And so if you took an average, so you're averaging smaller houses against larger houses, but all of them are averaged out and pay about the same? Is that how?
All single-family homes pay the same. Every single-family home site has one ERU. I mean, you're really starting to split hairs if you're talking
No, I'm just, yeah,
a 500 square foot difference potentially on some of the parcels. But that's where it's really important is on your commercial, industrial, and institutional sites where you have potentially, hundreds of ERUs available or that impact the system. So those are mathematically calculated or graphed and tracked, and every time there's an adjustment to the impervious area on a site, that's then added to the ERU count for that particular parcel.
Okay. No, I was just trying to get an idea of how it's all calculated.
No, that's all good. It's good to remind folks about it. There is information on the website, and if anybody has particular questions about their site or a site that they're concerned about, give me a call.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Is anybody taking advantage of any of the credits available?
A few have. There's a process in which people can go through a review process for that. There's an application. It requires them to put together the materials that helps justify the credit, and we evaluate them based on the standards that are outlined in the ordinance.
Okay. Any further on that? Otherwise, we're to other funds. Who gets the honors?
I do. Rodney, can you pass these down? One's for you as well.
Welcome, Bob. Welcome, Bob.
Oh, I can help you with that. I can help. Oh, that one, or do you want to do your other funds first?
It's attached.
Oh, it's all that, okay.
Probably don't need it.
Well, if you didn't get one now, you'd ask for it later.
That's true.
Not there. Not there.
Anybody missing one, Doc?
Unless they just put it on.
I thought Tammy was going to come sit by me, and I was going to, you can have your own spot. Oh, did you run out?
I got an extra one here.
Yeah, extra one. Tammy, do you have an extra? Oh, yes. Yes, you said.
Do you have enough? Yeah, one for you. Okay. Okay. So, this is information for our next packet, our next discussions too. Some of the questions that you had previously asked. But the other funds that I was talking about, they're up on the screen. I took a sampling of some of the funds that you may not necessarily see on a regular basis, just to give you an idea of what's going on. The first fund is the public safety building. You'll note that this year in expenses, custodial maintenance increased to $4,200, and that led us to increase our transfer in the general levy. we had to increase that by $4,200 to offset the expenditure. The total expenses and revenues for that account are $52,000. The second account that I pulled up is called Fund 230, Township Outreach Fund. There are grants that we currently receive, and those grants help to offset the cost of one of the case managers for the townships. And I just wanted you to know that that is out there, and we are making sure that those entries take place. So basically, it's pretty much a wash itself. The next fund is Fund 235, Landmarks. In 2017, Landmarks requested $4,000 for some grant programs. To date, I believe they've received 3 applications, but nothing has taken place as of yet. I know that they had requested $5,000 for 2018, so this just basically shows you what has been spent to date and what's been requested. The balance as of 2017 right now, we believe there's a fund balance of $5,182. Moving on to Fund 243, that's our fire pension fund. Each year, the levy, we transfer about $33,000 from the general fund into this fund, and what it does is it pays for all of our, our retirements. Is that correct, Donna? The fire pension fund? Yes. Yes, okay. Oh, thanks, Chief.
Chief's here, you can help too.
I don't want to speak incorrectly.
You're right.
The next fund is Fund 250. It's our sick leave fund. Sort of along the same parameter where we place an amount, the levy puts funds aside for sick leave, and we cover any expenses that occur throughout the year. We've got retiree health insurance payouts. What we're trying to do is establish a fund so that when people do retire, we have the funds to make the necessary payments at their retirement. Otherwise, if we didn't do this, we would have to try and find the money at the time that it occurs, and we'd also probably be penalized too. So we want to make sure that we're doing what we can.
Other personal.
So the fire pension and the sick leave funds are fully
Funded.
fully funded?
Yeah.
They're fully funded funds and
Well,
fire pension and,
just a question on that. That 30 whatever thousand for
33,000?
yeah, for the fire pension, that's not WR
That's
Sorry?
not the total
retirement
balance.
system. That's separate from the
Yeah.
Wisconsin retirement system.
Yes,
isn't
it is.
Oh, yes, this is separate
Strictly
from the
for the fire
Wisconsin
department.
retirement system. This is just the fire
That's just
department.
for the fire department.
Yes, that's correct.
How many people does that affect?
Volunteers? Scott, did you want to?
Just impacts.
Do you want to step up, please?
It's about 20? No. 30? 40?
It just impacts the volunteers. It goes back many, many, many years, and the volunteers themselves actually pay for it. So the transfer in is only what actually does not keep up for the interest versus there's a guarantee to make sure that the fund doesn't go backwards.
So it's basically an employer's portion of the fund for the volunteers.
I didn't hear the question.
It's the employer's portion. The employers pays that portion.
No, it's the employee, the city does, yes.
That's what I'm saying, the employer,
Except-
the
Yes.
city.
Yeah.
And what do the volunteers get out of that? I mean, they're eligible for a pension after so many years, or how does that work?
Yeah, 22 years of service, attained an age of 52, and they will receive their outgoing stipend until they die,
Okay,
and then their spouse will receive 60% until he or she dies.
okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
You can
Any
continue.
questions on the sick leave fund? That was the other one we were talking about, Fund 250. Fund 252 is the K-9 fund. The stipend, one of the officers is the K-9 officer, and he receives a monthly stipend, and that stipend is supposed to come from this fund. So we're just making sure that the money is getting transferred to the proper place. As of 2017, the current budget is $18,677. Fund 260, Economic Development. Now, we had proposed transferring in $10,000 in 2018. The Economic Development Fund currently has a negative balance of $67.46, and anticipating that transfer in 2018 with some minimal expenditures, we should hopefully have a positive balance of $7,421. Again, it's all based on what's to be determined for development.
So.
Some of Mr. Becker's time goes into this, and what I distributed to you earlier, or just a few minutes ago, there's a sheet in here that shows Gary Becker's consultant's time for 2016 and 2017. Now, I don't think he started his business until May of 16, so I did not get a chance to go back to Vera Becker and find out how much time he had spent with them. But you'll see that I was able to split it out based on his work on TIF District 5, which is the riverfront redevelopment area, economic development, operating expenses, and the RDA. And in 16, he spent about most of his time on TIF 5 and about $2,900 worth in the RDA. For 17 so far, he has spent about $2,900 in economic development, $10,170 on the RDA, and then $54,000 on TIF 5. So those are some of the costs that are in the Economic Development Fund. Does anyone have any questions?
Okay, so just to understand, some of the costs for our consultant is in the Economic Development Fund, and some of it is in the redevelopment.
And TIF 5, yeah.
TIF 5.
Scattered.
How about the city attorney? Is that the same thing, or is that all his lumped into the general?
If he works on items that are specific, you'll see that there's also an attachment in here on attorney fees. These sheets don't show you all of the detail where the costs have gone. You'll note the top sheet, this is Stafford. It's time January 2016 to current. Lana and staff put that together. There's approximately 17 different attorneys from Stafford that are utilized to handle city affairs. Some of the costs are charged back to developers. Some of the costs are paid as part of their fee, and some of the costs are miscellaneous projects that we come up with. There's a detailed list of everything, and if he does work on anything that's related, say, to the RDA, he charges the RDA for his time. So those costs are getting filtered through.
Okay, so thank you for providing this. I know I only asked for it a couple days ago, so I appreciate you.
Thanks to Lana. Also attached in there, too, is a detailed breakdown of the 2 firms that are utilized for personnel issues. We have Boardman and Clark, and from January 16th through current in 17, we spent about $11,000, almost $12,000. We also used Von Briesen and Roper for various issues, and during that same time period, we spent close to we spent a little over $8,000.
Okay, so what I'm going to try to figure out, and I don't know, I'll have to look at this later, is if we look at our attorney fees and what portion of that is just for general practice, I'll call it, and how much of it is for some of these other areas, if it makes sense, if we had an attorney that was basically a city employee, would there be any savings potential there? And the other question would be, is when you start tallying up the total of the time that our consultant and the city attorney spent on economic development and RDA and TIF, is there an opportunity there to reallocate those funds potentially for an economic development director? And, you know, we're not going to answer that question tonight, but those are the types of conversations that I would like to have at some point. I don't know if it's going to be this budget cycle or not. But this is the type of data I think that we're going to need in order to have those conversations. And at this point, you know, it's just a concept. I don't know if it's even a possibility. So that's why I asked for this information. I appreciate you getting it to us on short notice.
I think you might need some more detail on the attorney. Maybe a couple of the monthly summary bills we can show you and show you what's charged out and what we pay.
Sure.
That might help give you a better understanding too of how many different projects they're working on.
Okay, thank you. Alderperson Engelberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tammy, the cover sheet that you gave us, attorney fees, 1/16 to current, or to August 1st, basically a year and 8 months, 321,000, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, but a
That
lot of
seems
it
to have
goes to
gone
the
up.
developers.
That
Yeah,
seems-
there's a significant amount that's billed back.
Yeah, that seems to have gone up, but,
Well, unfortunately,
and
when
have
we
been
get
doing some
into,
development, I understand
when we
that.
get into issues, we need to protect ourselves
I
and,
understand that.
All right. And
That's the reason that the president just asked about possibly in-house attorney as opposed, you could hire a few attorneys for 321,000, you know.
And the question would be then is, would we be able to be reimbursed for that from the developers if it was a non-staff attorney versus a subcontracted attorney? I don't know those answers, but those, you know, are the conversations that I think as a group we should have.
Something for that continued conversation is the list on the back. If you turn that page over and you look at the list on the back of the Stafford Law Firm attorneys that worked with Attorney Dregney, he utilized over 17 different attorneys within his own firm who specialize in different things. So that is also part of the conversation. One attorney can't specialize in everything, so with the firm, they reach out within their own firm to get that specialty information.
Sure. Okay. Alderperson Jensen.
Just a simple comment on that, to what Mayor Olson was saying. You can pull out these numbers, and you can set it aside, and you can say, well, okay, we can use that for an economic development person. Even if you have that person, you're still going to need the lawyer. You're still going to need a person like Gary Becker. So that money is still going to be spent in that way. So to look at it, to look at trying to come up with the sum for that, I think we're way too early with that. We need to, first of all, we have to have development. We have to have a reason for an economic development director. And I don't see that we have that right now. So I think it's something that we're chasing that we don't need to chase right now.
AJ was just reminding me that as you look at these attorney comparisons, not the Stafford Rosenbaum one, Stafford Rosenbaum does not work with our union contract. This last year was a union contract year. So that one you'll see underneath the Boardman and Clark. Boardman and Clark was used for our union negotiations. So that one's a little higher than what it might typically be.
Sure.
So my question is that inside or outside of that 321,000?
Outside.
Outside.
it's outside, it's one of those separate
Actually,
sheets.
what was our total expenses? Attorney
I did not
expenses?
add them up.
I mean, you got like 11,000 and 8,000 plus the 321, right?
Yep.
So you're over 350 in that neighborhood.
Right, but only 87 of that 321 comes out of the city, right?
Well, the city's
No.
paying, right.
No.
Right.
You said costs, and what's the difference between costs and billable amount? Is it opposite? The billable amount goes to the developer? I mean, can you explain those columns?
Lana, do you recall?
So when we were reviewing the attorney's bills, what we did was the cost column was the whole cost of the statement for that month. And then within that statement, there were different tasks that the attorneys had completed that could be deemed billable to developers for the attorney's work in the development. So that's what was pulled out of the whole bill. So the portion of the billable amount is just a portion of that whole statement amount for that month.
And that's the amount that was due and payable by the City of Stoughton, not a developer or a TIF. Is that what you're saying?
So is
So-
it
so-
321
so we-
minus 87 is what the city paid, or is it
So
still?
we would pay the cost amount. So for example, in January, we would have paid the $8,589.37. But of that, the $1,823.50 would be billable expenses to developers.
Okay.
So we're able to recover some of those costs by billing it back to the developers.
So then our true cost for Stafford and Baum would be $234.96. That would be our true cost. This would be the cost minus the billable amount.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay.
Roughly 23%.
All right.
Okay.
We
Back
can
to Tammy.
Continue.
I just have two more funds to review. The Redevelopment Authority is Fund 261. We're recommending transferring in $10,000 as we did in 2017. God bless you. This account does carry a negative balance of $55,842. So that's something we will need to address at some point. And the last fund I had in the packet was the debt service fund. This shows you all of the various debt that's out there, what we're collecting from various agencies. Transfer in from several of the TIFs, from EMS, from the general fund, and stormwater. 2.6 million is what we paid out, and then 595 is what we're looking at in interest next year. So like I mentioned, there are a number of other funds as well, so we're trying to follow the auditor's request in developing budget for the various funds, because there never has been before. So, but we can't get them all done at once, so we're trying to address them as fast as we can.
We appreciate that. That's something that I know I've asked for in the past, and we haven't been able to receive. So thank you for pursuing that.
So there is still some more work to do, but
Sure.
if there's any other specific funds you want, just let me know, and we'll try to gather that information. Thank
Okay.
you.
Anything else on that? Otherwise, we're to the general fund budget.
Well, Tammy and Lana and others and AJ looked up some information from questions that were asked last Thursday night. So I think now's a good time for them to go through some of that information for the council. Not sure where you want to start. We've talked about the city attorney question.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was a question about what would it cost for a police officer or a firefighter. So I know AJ's worked with both Lieutenant Conlon and Chief Leck, Scott Wagner, and Mark Miller. So, can you pull that sheet up, Tammy?
I don't know if I can.
Okay,
If
well,
not-
it's in your packet.
Sorry.
2018 police and fire employee cost. If everybody could turn to the page that looks like this. Let me know when you're there.
That's the last page.
Yeah, if you
It's
got
on your
it.
tonight,
It's in the
Dennis.
handout.
Thank you.
Tonight.
It is in the
Handout.
handout packet, yes.
Yep.
It's the last page.
Rodney's going to try and put it up.
Okay, thank you. Okay, there we go.
Thank you.
You had asked me to put together the police cost if we had a new officer coming in. And if you look, there's two totals on there. The first one is $80,288.40. That's just the basic cost for a new employee, including benefits, life, dental. I also put in there the FICA and WRS at the higher rate, which is 10.7 for 2018 for a protected individual. So that comes to that total. And then I added in there the uniform cost at $2,800, a weapon at 500, and then we have the additional cost there at 50 cents per hour for an FTO. Should be 6 pay periods at 449 hours, which comes to an additional cost of 224.50 of additional cost. Chief Luck and I were talking before, and he wanted to make sure that we were all aware that FTO fourth year hourly rate below that would be the person who's actually doing the training, but typically they would be scheduled on. So that $14,000 should already be factored into what normal cost would be. So grand total there, including that officer as the FTO's wage, is $98,000. Otherwise, as Chief was saying, take $98,000 and back out the $14,000 because that person would already be scheduled to work.
Right.
So we're really looking at $84,000 additional cost.
Roughly 84,000.
Yeah. Any questions on that one? No? Okay, then I'll proceed. Next one is for an additional person in the fire department. If you scroll down on that one, Rodney, please. Okay, what I prepared here is a wage estimate as well, and what I took is the existing person in the fire technician position, his current wage, times the full-time position, which vetted out to $47,424. Added in the same taxes, the WRS at the lower rate as a non-protected, and came up with a grand total of $78,285. And then added in the cost of the uniform, a Class A uniform, the basic training, the Fire 1 training, and then the stipend, and that gives us a grand total of the $83,532.72. So that would be your total cost for bringing on an additional fire technician full-time. Any questions?
What's the volunteer stipend? If it's an employee, where does the volunteer stipend come in?
He's coming up.
Yep.
Yep. Oh, you can use that one up there too, yeah. They both work.
So for a full-time equivalent, the $1,600 should be removed.
Okay.
Okay. But that, I mean, that is accurate as what the stipend is.
Right, but if they're actually getting a wage, they don't need a stipend.
If they're getting a wage, they do not get a stipend.
Okay, thank you.
But when they come in off, I lose the hours. So we still need to compensate them, and that's covered in the wage.
Okay. So the,
Let's remove that from
So
Scott.
pull that line, yep, Scott and Mark.
Okay.
And Mason. Any questions?
No questions on that.
We'll go about
Oh, there's one. Oh, the person Hirsch.
well, I guess, with that said, it's about $165,000 that we need to find if we're going to do that. So I guess that's going to be a challenge to try to find that.
Yeah,
165.
not something that I was able to find. I mean, I certainly support public safety just as much as everyone else. It just wasn't in the budget.
I had sent you a list
Anyway.
of questions that I had said, I don't know if you guys caught it before coming to the meeting, but saying, these are things that in the private sector I would normally go through when I would receive a request for additional personnel, and I had the questions on there. And I don't know if you've already gone through that process of asking those questions. Again, I stated in there, I don't have an opinion one way or the other, but as your HR director, it's my responsibility to make sure that we're adequately staffed or that I'm providing you the information to make the right decision. So I gave you that list of questions to think about and to look at, and it came in an email to you, Regina, later this afternoon.
Oh, well, I
Okay.
checked.
Yep, which is
later.
fine. I was just saying that's something to think about as we go through this.
I would comment on that.
Yeah.
Thanks for sending the email, and I think that raises the question, if that's should be part of the process for staff, if they do have a personnel request, that we take what you have in the email and maybe we'll tweak it or add or whatever to it and have a form to fill out, so at budget time, we have all this information before we get here.
Right, and it
Because
shows that.
if we really want to have a serious discussion.
Right.
It's really difficult to do on the fly.
Right, and I said what's so difficult, and I did put that in the email, is we know that these are items that affect our community. And we care about the safety within the community, so it's a difficult decision to make. But I think we need to be asking the right questions. Are we right-sized? Do we have the right people in the right positions? Have we done a study? I mean, we're always interested in doing a study. Have we done a study in these areas to see, are we handling this correctly? Are we staffing right? What are neighboring communities doing? What are local averages, not national averages? And we have that information for you. So I would look real hard at the process that we're going through when we're requesting personnel, and I think we should handle it more in a business manner, where normally you have an ROI, show us the need, and go through those questions.
Well, and to your point, I think that's something that should be ongoing.
Right.
I don't think it's something that we should, all of a sudden it's budget time and we start the conversation. That conversation should be continuously evaluating the structure of our city.
Right.
And I'm sure some of that naturally occurs.
Of course.
But doesn't seem like it occurs to this level, or at least if it is, it's not communicated. So I think, going forward, I think that's something that could be done.
Okay, good.
So I hope this answered your questions as for what a full-time staff in either department would cost, or could cost, I guess. We tried to get it as complete or totally as we could. So the other question that you had asked Council President Swally in an email was, the budget that I have before you includes a 2.25% increase for all personnel, and this is, it's market competitive. Dane County, I know, is in that range. Other area communities are in that range of 2.25%. We just settled a union contract with our current officers at 2.25%. Looking at all the data that I had available to me, I've proposed a 2.25% in our 2018 budget for all city employees. When you had asked what would the difference be if council so chose to reduce that down to 2%, we have to remember, one of the first things to recall is that our police officer union contract is settled. So they will receive 2.25 regardless of any other change, anything that goes forward from here. So if you were to reduce all other employees, I guess first of all I want to make sure that, I want to go on the record that I don't support a change. Obviously my budget had 2.25% in it for a valid reason, looking at the data in our area. But if you were, as a council, to choose to go to 2%, you could save $8,300. If you chose to go down even further to a 1.5% increase for the remainder of that staff, you could save about $30,162. Further to 1.25%, as you had requested, would be a reduction of $38,300. And if you were to take that increase all the way down to 1%, you'd save about $46,276.
So I guess the reason I asked for it is if we wanted to entertain the idea of trying to fund something else, even if we went down to zero, it doesn't appear like there would be enough there to even cover one position, much less two.
No.
Two.
I had sent an email on this as well to you guys. I think it was yesterday. A couple of the points that I want to make here as you're thinking about this or contemplating making a decision is looking at that 2.25%, as Mayor Olson said, we already settled that contract with the police. Not all police employees, as I stated in that email, are under union contract. So that means that 2.25% is going on across the board for all union, but our sergeants, our lieutenants, the chief, the dispatchers, the rest of the administrative support there are not considered part of that union contract. So you want to talk about disparity and issues that we could potentially cause. I don't think this is the place to do it, in my professional opinion. The other thing is, we've always talked about the issues that we have in regards to compression. And taking your police officers that are sworn and union at 2.25 and the rest of them, we're going to start causing internal issues with compression where potentially our 4-year plus union employees are going to be getting real close to the sergeants, LTs, current salaries. So we would be causing an issue there as well. So.
Other personnel, Connor?
AJ, could you talk a little bit about our wage study, and as I understand it, we have a number of long-term employees that are still below their market rate. Is that
Absolutely.
accurate?
Yes, that is. Just to go back, and I had responded to your email today, good points that you had asked. And keeping in mind, year one, what we did is we'd put the grade levels in place, and then we moved everybody that was not even in the scale onto step one. So at least we had everybody on the Springstead study. Then what we did is gave an increase or a COLA. The people that moved to midpoint, there were 3 leadership team members last year that were not at midpoint that were moved to midpoint. So the rest of the staff, as I talked about last week, they're just sitting in the scale on a step, depending upon where their current salary is at. They have not been right-sized. And that's why I had made the comment that pay for performance, yes, if that's something you want to look at, fine. But we need to get the employees first where they belong. We have employees that have been here many years that are sitting below midpoint. And midpoint is market. And actually, we're a little bit below market because when we implemented and you approved to put that salary range in place, remember we had to lower it a little bit to be able to afford it.
Right.
So is market really market? The answer to that is we're falling low, and that's why we're asking for the 2.25 to lay it across the board to keep that study current, so we're at least competing. Next year, I'm going to be coming to you with how do we right-size this and make sure the employees are falling into the proper steps. All we have them in right now is on the scale. I can't say that a 15-year veteran that's performing at a high level is where they should be currently in the scale. I can tell you probably not.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
So just to follow up on that, when you say there's some people that aren't at the midpoint, but we have others that are at or above the midpoint, is that correct?
That is correct, but it's not the majority of your staff.
Right. So the point is by doing it across the board, even the people that are above the midpoint are going to be at least the same or even higher above the midpoint, and we still have this other group that is not at the midpoint.
That is correct.
So how do we address that?
That's what I'm talking about for next year, where we need to right-size and get the people where they belong within it. And it's not going to be a standard across the board. So for example, employee A is sitting at step 2, high performer, been here 10 years. They probably shouldn't be sitting at step 2. What we need to find out is how do we move them forward and how much does that cost?
Right.
And that's where, when the study was implemented, they had told us that you need to understand financially what the impacts are of putting the study in place. So step 1, get your employees on the scale. Step 2, we need to start to right-size and get them where they belong in the scale. Step 3, how do they progress? But we haven't right-sized yet.
So I guess my question is would it be advantageous to try to right-size the people that are below the mid to get them up without the people that are already above the mid and try to get everybody closer to the mid?
I'm shaking my head no, because those employees that are at the top of the scale, you've got some really high performers up there. I can't say, I was looking across the board at all of our staff in the list, and with my limited knowledge of each employee, I can't say that there's anybody here that is currently on a performance improvement plan, and the managers are doing their job, and they're working with their staff. So I can't say that there's anybody here that's working for the city that does not deserve a 2.25% increase. So focusing on those that are lower and trying to bring them up at the cost of those on the higher end of the scale, higher to them means, okay, I'm maybe at step 13, but I'm also not on the high end of what a normal scale is.
You've been here a while.
And you've been here a while, so.
And the reason we bring this up is because people that are in the private sector don't really, there's a big difference between the private and the public sector when it comes to wages and benefits, because the people in the private sector will tell you, well, I haven't had a raise in years, and my insurance premium keeps going up every year. What gives?
Yep. I come from the private sector. I have over 23 years of private sector experience, as you know, when you hired me. That's what I come from. But I did some calculations just comparing my assistant to private sector. And taking Ginny from a $15 an hour job here at the city to private sector, same job, running a SHRM survey, which is a vetted, cleansed survey, she would go from $15 to $20 or $21 an hour. but she's going to pay more for health insurance. So I figured her at $350 a month for health insurance. $350 times 12, you subtract that out because that's less taxable income. She still came out ahead, paying more for her health insurance, making more hourly than she makes here.
But she wouldn't have the pleasure of working with you.
That's true. So I think that's what we're up against. I think the private sector piece is something that, whether or not we want to admit, that's our competition.
Employee shortage.
And I know that there was some discussion about benefits as a whole, and oh my goodness, the employees are saving. I did the savings calculations, and it's $8 a year savings for an employee on the single plan, and $22 a year is what they're saving going to the family plan. So I can give you a copy of those calculations, but I did those. And you're talking $8 and $22. So that's what they saved for 28 going into 2018, along with having to make changes, which we all understand that savings is what, there was a reason for that.
AJ and our leadership team talk a lot about the employee shortage, and we all know the very real employee shortage that doesn't just happen in municipalities, but it's happening throughout the county, the state, and nationwide. So if we don't stay competitive and we don't pay our staff at a market or at a competitive rate, we're going to have a hard time not only bringing them here, but keeping them here. And bringing them is only the first part of that challenge. Once you get them here, you've got to be able to pay them a decent wage, and you've got to be able to retain them.
Right.
Otherwise, you spent time training them up to jump ship, and you don't want that.
And I think most of us understand that, those of us that are employed or have been employed or have a business, we get that. And it's just making sure that we get this kind of information so we can do our due diligence.
I also did some neighboring community comparisons, and the 2.25, Donna, is exactly right on. And we also had Attorney Zock look at that, not only for the police, but looking at it for our general staff. And I was just looking over there, Fitchburg just passed their budget, and they did a 2%, but they already have right-sized on their survey. So I can see why they're only correcting at 2% for the employees. And that's across the board. So they're not doing anything different for high performers, low performers. They did a straight 2%, but their scale is also higher. So that's why we're asking for the 2.25. And then just to note, we are at, the unemployment rate is just over 3% in Dane County. So it's making it tough for us to recruit. And I'd put in my email to you as well, talking about the senior center and the other departments where we've had to go above the standard amount that we would recruit at because of the cost of what employees are making elsewhere, trying to get them to come into the city. Even offsetting, because when we talk to them, I'll compare for them what their current rate is against our benefit package. So, I mean, we've really had to do some stretching there.
Sure. I have Alderperson Engelberger and then Hirsch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week, Chief Leck and Chief Wagner made some pretty compelling arguments that we need an extra police officer and we need a couple extra firemen full-time. And, I took it serious. I thought it was pretty compelling arguments. Your email you sent us this morning kind of disputes that a little bit, I think.
It's not a dispute, as I stated in there.
It is,
just
AJ.
things to think about.
I understand that, but, so my question to Chief Leck and to Chief Wagner is, are those arguments as compelling as you gave us last week, or has your position changed any from this email? Do we need extra officers and firefighters?
Speaking for the police department, absolutely, we need extra police officers. And I shouldn't use the word extra. We need additional police officers. I didn't see the email that was sent out, so I can't respond to anything that was on there, but the argument is valid, and I think that, speak for Chief Wagner.
You have the data.
Oh, this one here.
Yeah.
I think it's valid there as well. I mean, we continue to fall behind, and at some point we have to address the public safety needs. And it's only going to get worse in the future. I mean, you look at what Lisa's talking about coming in the future there, about staffing daytime call help and so forth. It's only going to continue to get worse each and every year. but we can't bear it on the backs of our current employees as a way to fund that either. I mean, we understand that fully, and Scott and I know we're in agreement with that, is that, you know, you're asking your current employees to work harder, and yet you turn around and say, no, they're not worth at least a cost of living increase. That's a difficult pill to swallow. Or that you're pitting public safety, additions to public safety at the expense of the rest of the employees in the city.
I mean, I totally agree. I'm a former labor leader, so I used to negotiate contracts for workers, and I totally understand that argument. I'm not interested in cutting people's wages or not giving people raises, but you know, we've got a real problem in this state as far as how to fund municipalities, how to fund school boards, school districts. It's getting out of hand. You know, we've tightened the belt how many years in a row for many years now, and it only seems to be getting worse. We keep getting more local control taken away from us. It's something has to be done about it. Otherwise it's going to be starting to affect our public safety and other departments. It's a crazy situation.
Michael, those are some of the things that I work on the League of Municipalities and Dane County Cities and Villages, and we work with our lobbyists.
I don't think they do a good enough job for us.
They're trying, and we can all debate that, but they're certainly trying, and they certainly, I know both chiefs and others work with their respective organizations as well to get into the Capitol and to make those comments and make those arguments that local control is key.
They're certainly not hearing it, are they?
They're not hearing it. Unfortunately, they're not hearing it. AJ wanted to comment, and then I'd like to speak as well.
I'd like to go on the record and just make sure it's very clear. My email was not, and I put in there by any means intended to deter. It was questions that you need to ask yourself no matter what department you're hiring in. Tim got it, exactly what he said. This is something that we need to go through whenever we're adding staff. It's basic questions of, do we need this? Are we right sizing? So I just want that on the record that I am not saying we don't need it. In fact, I put that in the email.
And I understand
It's just an
that.
exercise I'd like you to go through and look at.
I understand that, and that's why I asked the chiefs if that was the case, if they
So
still
the question really comes down to, how do we as a community then, how do we afford the changes that we know that we need? Right? We all know, we acknowledge we need some public safety assistance, but we also know that we need assistance in our public works department, in our parks department, in our forestry department, in our planning department. I mean, there are other departments with needs as well. Library would like to do some additional things, and our senior center, who care for our most, I'll call them our most vulnerable, although they may object to that word, right, Cindy? But as our population ages, the senior center is going to need some more assistance, more help down there. How do we address those needs? And I think it's a combination of a couple of things, continuing to fight in the Capitol for that local control that we continue to lose, and it continues to just slide away a little bit more every year. We need to continue to work toward that. We need to work toward growing our community. Our schools continue to talk about a declining enrollment. They need more pupils, because that, like it or not, is how their aid is figured, is on pupils in the schools. They need more pupils. We need more growth in our community to allow that net new construction to get up there. Remember the days when they said you can grow your levy by 3%. And we thought, oh my gosh, that's horrible. That's just terrible, 3%. Well, then it wasn't many years longer, and they said, no, you can grow your levy by the amount of net new construction. And for Stoughton, that was much less than 3%. This year it's 1.75. So still not up to 3%. So we have to have not crazy growth, but we have to have managed growth in our community, along with working with others and our associations to make some change in the Capitol.
So I have Alderperson Hirsch and then O'Connor.
Well, thank you, and I think the mayor kind of touched on exactly what I was thinking. I mean, I'm not here to say that I don't want to give our staff, our great staff, an increase, but I also listen to the two chiefs here, and I look at all our expenses and our budgets, and I don't know what we can cut.
There isn't.
To create these positions, and yet it's really it's almost horrifying to know that we are understaffed and underpaid, and there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, besides, God forbid laying off people, but then we're still understaffed, and, we're kind of running at a bare minimum. So I agree with you. We need to be more, I guess, more forceful at the state level because they're ruining our communities. I mean, they want job growth, and yet we can't grow our jobs, and unleashed development isn't good for communities either.
Right. I think residential growth is helpful, though, because people like to live where they work where they live, or at least close.
Right, but
at least
not
close.
unchecked, like you said.
Oh,
It has
no,
to be
yeah.
smart, and it can't be growth just to fill in the school is not necessarily a good thing, because eventually we're going to run out of space. So, I don't know where we're going to find it. We have to figure out something, because we can't put our citizens at risk. And
Well, we've done, if I may, I was going to just once again applaud our leadership team in that they have done and continue to do an unbelievably great job with the resources that they have available to them. Once again, we've bridged a gap, and it gets harder when that static budget comes out with the gap. So once again, though, we've been able to bridge the gap. We know that there are needs out there, but we continue to use what we have to make our community the best that it can be at this time by continuing residential growth and some encouraging commercial growth and keeping those businesses that we already have here in Stoughton to hire more employees and to keep those that they have. That's a big part of what we need to do.
Personal comment.
I think more just to AJ's memo today. I read it and I thought it made perfect sense. If you're going to kind of coordinate some response to additional employees, you have to verify that truly is needed through a study. We did the market study and determined that our employees were underpaid. So for me, that would be a priority at this point. And I would certainly be in favor of doing something where we look and see not only for next year or even the year after that, but future planning for, it seems like all three emergency service departments are going to have some real struggles.
Okay, thank you. So just, a couple comments. I think the study's important. I think that we need to do some succession planning as more people retire from the city. We had several people retire a few years ago, and we did take a look at consolidating the EMS and fire chief position. Didn't make sense to do it, but we did look at it. We had opportunity earlier this year with utilities and the finance director position. Really didn't have much of a conversation about that. There may have been an opportunity there that we lost. But I think what we need to do is we need to have a plan. So if as people retire and as our community changes, will there be opportunities to change job descriptions, merge positions and create new ones? We did that in the school district when I was on the school board. We sat down as a group and we talked about, succession planning, because we knew we were going to have some retirements and what we wanted it to look like when that occurred. So when it did happen, we already had a plan in place and everybody understood what we were going to do, and we were able to successfully do that. And same thing with closing the school. We had a plan in place. We did a study to see if the current schools could fit the students that we had. We found we could do that with one less building. When it got to the point where we hit the magic number, we closed the school. We had a bus system in place, so we could accommodate that. As a city, I think we need to do more planning, and I think that involves not only the leadership team, but I think that, some ad hoc, maybe some council members could be involved, so we get some ideas and some buy-in at the beginning, so we can make sure that when there is an opportunity, we know what we're going to do. Because if we wait for the opportunity, then you're in a scramble mode, and then you really are basing your decision more on emotion than you are on data. As far as the growth, I do agree. We do need some growth in our community. It needs to be smart. It needs to be managed. The unfortunate reality of the growth that we've had is we're not really getting the full benefits of the growth that we've had so far, because we've invested our money. We've invested more city service time required. The net new construction dollars it barely keeps up with the cost of living, much less additional staffing that's needed for the growth. I think that's a real challenge. I think that's something that maybe the state of Wisconsin really doesn't understand that well. And, we need to come up with some strategies to be able to communicate that. And it's not just Stoughton, Wisconsin, it's other municipalities and villages in the state of Wisconsin. We have a lot of common challenges. So, I think that those are areas that hopefully within the next couple of years we can put together some ideas and figure out how we can get there. Alderperson Hirsch.
Thank you. And I guess, again, AJ, I know it's going to be tough, because even though we want to get our staff up to where they are, but if there's no money to get them there, we're going to be at the same place next year, or unless there's a magic pot of money, which I know Tammy is hiding somewhere, that
It's at the end of the rainbow.
it'd be all well and good if we want to get people up on the correct steps, but if there's no money don't seem to be any wiggle room. And I think we really need to figure out, yes, we can do, surveys or whatever, but those cost money. That takes away the possible money that we could use to actually hire somebody. So it's a catch-22. So if we spend $30,000, $40,000 or whatever it's cost to actually study the problem, that could have went into a position. So how do we justify that?
I don't have the answer for that.
I don't know how much it costs to do these studies, but, that's money, they could have paid between, only have a 1% increase, and somewhere where we're coming up with the money to do a study, you almost have a position paid for. So we need to think about how we're actually talking about doing studies and where that money's coming from and what pot. When right now we have two chiefs saying that we do need, at least one each, it's going to be tough. So I guess the challenge is for us all to go back and figure out if we can find some savings. I noticed that there's a lot of redundancies in each of the departments, whether everybody has supplies and different phones. Is there a way? I know the IT director was talking about possible savings by consolidating supplies, phones, or whatever. We need to be really looking at everything so we can minimize our budget, so we can maximize our employees. So
I think the other thing to think about, Regina, is one of the other points is salaries are reoccurring. So, what we're looking at here is a one-time. Are we going to do a 1%? Are we going to do a 2%? What are we doing? Just to think about that as well. So wherever we find that funding, if that's the direction we're going, it needs to be coming out of a location that we know we're going to be able to continue, because I don't want to be hiring and then laying off.
Well, that's...
Yeah. No, I don't think you would do either. No.
Yeah. Right. And
just
so
food
if
for
we
thought.
all bump them up to 2.25, is that hurting us future years of being able to hire, because that continues? Because next year they might, it might be another cost of living increase.
Mm-hmm.
We might be pricing ourselves out of hiring.
We're definitely not pricing ourselves by any means out of the market. We're low.
No, I know, but of hiring people that we do need to fill in other positions.
I would just caution in saying there are positions out there and people are looking, and if we're not staying competitive, I'm not threatening, I'm just saying think about it. Positions are aplenty. You walk just about anywhere, you look in the paper, you look online, headhunters are calling. What's keeping people here? Do the employees feel respected? Is their compensation fair? Do they have a decent benefit package? All of that comes together.
I know you're talking about things that I've talked about with staff for be 7 years now, almost 8. Looking at supplies and consolidating. Do we really need, gee, chief, do you need that kind of a pen? And I'm exaggerating a little bit, but we've cut and we've looked at and we've consolidated for, well, my entire tenure as mayor. So when you look at the budget and you say, and we've heard several say, not much left in there to reduce, because it's been reduced to the point of nothing left.
Right, and I mean, I don't know what has been done.
I'm agreeing
just
with you,
trying
yep,
to
yep.
Figure out where else we can, that isn't affecting somebody's salary, but that we can make some savings so we can get people up on their steps and get the public safety officers that we need. So that's going to be a challenge to everybody.
Alderperson O'Connor.
I think Regina's looking for that magic pot of money.
I'm not looking at it.
No, I know that.
I'm just saying, let's not waste it on an expensive study when you could hire somebody for it.
That's not where I was going, but what I was going to say was that really what the budget's doing is recognizing things that the city wants to support and city residents want to support. And we always have the option of going a referendum route if we think that that's truly what the public wants.
Thanks, Pat. That's one of the things I was going to talk about when I mentioned, so how do you fund it? It's through growth, and some communities are looking at referendums. There's a community north, and I won't pretend to say the name of the community, but they've tried it for quite a few years, and they've not succeeded. Chief Leck talks about in his circle of police associations where they're talking about referendum. Referendum's an opportunity. It's not been successful yet. It doesn't mean you couldn't try.
Well, then maybe we need to try. Because
Yeah, it's not an answer, sadly, for this year, but it's something for next. To
How
think
long
ahead,
does it
you have
take?
to talk. Referendums can take, I'm going to look at our clerk because she knows that better than I do. But I know when a school, and the Stoughton School District goes for referendum, they spend a couple of years getting ready, getting all their data together to talk about why they need it, then take it to the community to explain why they need it, and then it goes to referendum. How long, Lana, do you think?
I couldn't give you an honest answer.
I've been
I
through a
honestly
few
have
of
no
them.
idea.
Right. I mean, they take years to start talking
They
about
do, and
what it
they
is
really
and
need to be
promoting it.
driven by the community. We
Yep.
can't drive it. It
No.
needs to be a community decision. So if that's something that the community wants to pursue, we need to have some feedback from the community that they're concerned about public safety, for example, or they're concerned about public works or the senior center or whatever is important to them. And that's really how you do it. All we can do is provide the information, the data, and it's really up to them to go out there and explain the need for us. So,
There's
anyway,
a couple different kind of referendums before we
Sure.
leave the referendum discussion. There's a reoccurring referendum, and the school has been successful obtaining reoccurring referendums, and that's where they get an increase, and then that bump just stays there. It doesn't go away. Or you can have a one-time referendum. Schools and communities use a one-time referendum if they want to build a new building.
so, anyway, oh, go ahead, Alderperson Johnson.
Yeah, everybody's been talking about kind of bouncing around a little bit close to the subject of growth. And that, to me, is the only reasonable way that this community can move forward. And reasonable growth, of course. I don't know, maybe I'm missing something here, but we've got a development on the west side of town that we had a projected $45 million worth of assessed value, which is $800,000 worth of, at the current mill rate, roughly $800,000 of revenue to the city.
where is it?
I don't see why we're talking about this. Yes, this is something I've been on this council for 10 years, and for 10 years, the budget has been like this, where we've been cutting and cutting and cutting and trying to scrimp and save and robbing from Peter to pay Paul. And the only way that we can get out of this is a referendum that was talked about, which I don't think is a good idea. The other is growth. We have to have better than the 1.75. We have to have better than the 2. We have to have, to get ourselves out of this hole, we have to have closer to 5% growth for a sustained time before we're going to be able to afford the 2 extra or 4 extra policemen or the couple extra people that we need for all of the other departments. We need to change our priorities. We need to set our priorities in how this community is going to be able to go forward. We can't go forward now. We're treading water and we're sinking, basically. So, like it or not, we need to grow.
Oh, and I think that's a legitimate point, but there's a cost associated with growing.
Of course there is.
And, you know, what we need to do is we need to have a plan for growth, and we really don't. Because if we're to grow, potentially we need more police, more fire, more EMS, more vehicles, more of this, more than that. We need to have a roadmap. So instead of saying we want to grow, we need to say, well, if we grow this much, this is what it's going to take. And if we grow this much, this is what it's going to take. And then calculate the return on the investment. Mm-hmm. Because right now, it's more of a philosophy and a concept than it is anything that you can grow your way out of this.
We cannot grow our way out of it.
Because the communities that have grown, they have challenges too, you know. I mean, you can look at Sun Prairie, for example. They have challenges there. You know, they've had conversations about getting rid of the volunteer fire department. You know, they've had, you know, they have challenges too. I know people that are moving out of towns because they grew. Mm-hmm. So, and it's not going to happen overnight. So what do we do to bridge the gap? And those are the kind of conversations that, you know, I think we need to have more of as a group. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is if we can work more efficiently on our normal business. So that's kind of something we're just going to have to challenge ourselves to do going forward. Did you have your hand up, Regina?
Well, I was just going to say the same thing. The more you grow, the more you need more police. I mean, it's
you have to do
gonna...
a cost-benefit analysis
right.
or something, and I don't know if we have the capacity to do that, you know? Mm-hmm. But that's certainly a conversation we should have.
Absolutely needs to be.
So we're getting to a point where we're going to have to make a decision tonight whether we want to make a recommendation on this budget or if we want to have another meeting, or I guess we have to determine, you know, what's the pleasure of the group here tonight. Well, go ahead, Pat.
I make a motion to approve the budget as presented.
Second.
Okay, so there's a motion, so we would recommend this to council.
Yes.
As presented, and there's a second. And is there any discussion? Oh, go ahead, Tim.
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
Does that include all of the other budgets as well? The Opera House, the library, the EMS, and the stormwater? Or is it just the general fund?
That was my intention.
Okay.
All of it.
Well, the agenda says the general fund. So that's
Actually,
what I was-
above it says review and recommend approval for each one as well.
Oh, okay, so all right.
I didn't know if it was a individual act
I
or...
didn't catch that. We were gonna
No problem.
do them separately, or how do you guys want to do it? You want to do them all together?
Certainly.
Do them all together? Okay. Alderperson Hirsch?
I have a question. So if we're doing them all together, does that include the 2.25 increase?
Yeah, that would include everything that's been presented over the 2 nights that we've been here. And the alternative is to, at this point, since we have a motion, would be to either make some amendments or try to convince others that we need more discussion. So, do you have anything else? Otherwise, Alderperson Engelberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tammy, I'd like you to explain this sheet along with how it relates to this sheet, the overall budget. I don't see the same numbers in here. I see different numbers.
So you're talking about the slideshow,
The bottom line,
bottom line,
the levy,
and what are you comparing it to?
and the summary budget for 2018. I see
Just wanna get
taxes
the
on
right
line
one.
1 of the summary budget
Summary
that are
budget
different
reports?
than the levy, total levy.
That would pay for.
Those are revenues.
And maybe explain for people how the process works.
I think we could cut things.
Actually, it's easier if you compare the bottom line sheet to the mayor's proposed budget. It was the other report that was handed out at the last meeting, the one in color.
This one, yep. I didn't see a total on this one.
At the very end.
You'll see that the tax levy, that the levy limit that we started out with for 2017's calculations was $7,158,007. We added debt service, and that brought the total levy to $8,507,687. If you look on the very first line,
Yep,
it says property taxes. That's where we get that
I
number.
see that. Where
Okay.
is it here? On this one. This is a compilation of the whole thing.
That's a compilation, and the taxes include a number of different line items from the mayor's proposed budget. If you take all of the revenues and add them up, you get, so say if you go to page 3 of the mayor's proposed budget, total estimated revenues come to $13,343,089.
Yep,
That is your total for total revenues in the summary budget report.
okay.
I'd have to break it down, see how the breakdown came apart. What it did is it takes and classifies it into various sections instead of the detailed line item that you have in the other report.
So I
They're
guess
the
I'm
same
wondering-
numbers, they're
I'm just wondering
just-
why the taxes line doesn't match up with the,
Well, because the taxes
Levy.
line actually includes other taxes that are in here. And I'd need to just double check which ones those are that combine to make up that number, because I don't know that off the top of my head. As to the other numbers that are on the bottom line sheet, the equalized value, that is a known number. Our assessed value is an assumption. We do not have that information yet. That you never get until around the middle of November. So the assessors, as I think I mentioned at the last meeting, had estimated what the assessment ratio would be. And so that number is then, you take your proposed tax levy, divide that into your assessed value assumption, and that's how we get a $8.12 per thousand assessed value.
so why does that not come out before you do the budgeting?
I'm sorry?
Why does that not come out from the state prior to our budgeting process?
Unfortunately, that's how they do it.
That's just how they do it.
We get equalized value information in August. They gather all of the information that's submitted from the various jurisdictions throughout the state. I don't know if it takes longer for some reason to put that all together, but then that information comes out in November.
Just doesn't make sense.
I agree with you.
It's like that for the school district too, because they do their budget in October, and their fiscal year is different, and the state budget is, may
You
or
make,
may
you
not
make
be
your
passed.
best guess, and you'll know right at the very end if you did well or not.
So one thing I would like to request when we wrap this all up is if you could just kind of project out at, well, specifically KPW, but you could probably include Nordic Ridge, and project out next year based on the current net new construction formula, what you would anticipate, at least from the projects that we have going. Obviously, there's going to be other projects that we don't know what they're going to be yet, but I'm just going to be kind of curious to see what kind of a glimpse of what next year is going to look like. So if we could start these discussions, we'll know whether or not it's a possibility that the growth that's out there will help generate enough net new constructions so we can start having a conversation earlier next year about, you know, potential positions that we might want to consider adding.
No problem.
Thank you. Alderperson Hirsch.
I guess this is something we had, a couple of us had talked about after a meeting last year with respect to the police and fire. I guess I'm not comfortable with passing the budget as it is right now. I still want to find a way that we could possibly get one police and one fire. And maybe one way to do it is not give the full 2.5% wage and maybe start, have the police and fire hire their person in half year. So we'd only be looking for maybe $83,000 total cost if we hired them in June as opposed to January. And so, and then we can, you know, I'm trying to work both ways here. I mean, I want to honor the staff, and I don't like hearing that the staff doesn't think the council has their back, because that's not true. We have approved every single position increase, and so I don't get where they're coming from with that. But I do want to support our fire and our police. So maybe if we hire them half year, we only for this year need to come up with $81,000 as opposed to, or $83,000 is the 165. And then if we, you know, give them, you know, 1.1% or 1.2% increase as opposed to 2.5, we can start getting closer to what we need to get our public safety what they need. So I guess I would entertain a motion for this to go back to,
So that would be an amendment?
yeah. Well, it wouldn't be amendment, it would just be to go back to,
Well, there's a motion on the table.
yeah,
so you
I
have
guess
to-
it has to be amendment to go back to HR, police and fire and finance to work the numbers for a full-time police and fire to come on in June, so we have 6 months. And
The number
then,
in half.
huh?
You just cut the number in half.
Yep,
Yep. So you wouldn't have, we don't have to really do anything for you, just,
right, I know.
yeah.
And then, you know, if we go down to, you know, 1%, we're missing maybe $30,000 that we need to find somewhere.
Okay, so there's a motion. Is there a second?
What's the amendment?
The amendment would be to, what, direct staff to,
Right.
or amend the budget to do, I mean, how you want it to read?
Yeah, to amend the budget to include a police and fire personnel starting in June, and to offset the costs by reducing the, increase the cost of living increase to only 1% to offset the costs.
So, did you get it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah? Okay. Is there a second for that?
Sure, I'll second it.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Did you want to elaborate? Otherwise, I have Alderperson Engelberger on deck here.
No.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, the mayor and the staff have met, talked about this. I guess my question is for any staff person that's here, department head, give me an idea where you think we can come up with some money. I'd like to hear from any of you.
Who wants to go first?
I just want to make a statement in that we have, and certainly I want everyone else to speak up as well, and not, don't echo what I'm saying, but they need to speak from what they believe is best for their departments too. But we have scrubbed and we have looked, and we've presented you with the best that we believe we've got at this time. My concern with going half the year is that we've got to find a way to fund the full year the next time.
I guess I don't see any.
I'll speak.
Rod?
I don't have a silver bullet, but I'll certainly echo what the mayor said. The accounts that I administer, actually outside of wages and benefits for my department, is a net decrease of about $10,000. We have a slight increase in revenues, and we've whittled $250 here and $250 there. There is nothing that we're trying to fluff in our budget. While the public safety aspect is an important aspect, I think you saw a sheet that had personnel requests from multiple departments, not mine. I didn't have one in there. And I think that somewhat reflects my attempt to recognize that there really are employee needs throughout this city. And it's troubling to just see them focused on two departments. I'm not diminishing their need. I'm just suggesting that there's far more employee needs throughout this community. Even talked about merging of positions, and there might be some opportunities there. I'm not suggesting there are, but even in the light of a merge, I think you'll find that the actual staff hour, the staffing levels are very low here. There isn't excess time in anyone's plate here to be doing things. I think if you were able to spend some time in any one of our departments, you'd find that there is a lot of people going over and above, and to hear the potential to not keep people at least in line with the market is real troubling. And again, I can't find you a bucket of money, but I'm here to tell you that I think that there are some staff that'll be quite disappointed in seeing that we can't keep our wage matrix competitive and at market rate.
I would agree with Rodney. I mean, I'm not interested in, like I said, I'm not interested in cutting wages or not giving people a raise. I just, where's the money coming from? I don't see it anyplace. I hear people talking about development, and we need more development. You know what? We've been developing quite a bit in the last couple of years. We've I don't know how much we've grown population-wise. We'll find out in 2020. But you know what? We've got some limitations too with our growth. We've got a state government that basically is refusing to fund more roads, and that's one of our big problems here compared to everybody else in Dane County. We don't have that 4-lane highway to zip right up to Madison like everybody else does. That's one of the biggest things we have of why we're not growing in this city as much as everybody else, even though we have grown quite substantially lately, and we grew more than everybody else in the 90s prior to our lack of growth in 2000 to 2010. So I don't know where the money's coming from. I don't hear from any other staff either.
Go ahead, AJ.
I don't have the answer either, but I think I've probably talked till I'm blue in the face in trying to advocate for the employees and what it takes to be able to retain and attract, and that falls on my lap. And I can say on behalf of every department here, we're in crisis mode. And I know the way that I operate every day is it's what is the biggest, tallest nail that I have to deal with. That's crisis. And I did have an ask. I know some people chose not to ask just because they knew the answer was no. But to not reward and to not keep us competitive, it's only going to force us to slide further and further behind. It's going to be more difficult to attract, to retain. The attitude is going to be, okay, I gave up my raise for a police officer. And that's exactly what Greg said. That's not what I'm looking for. But I can tell you when cost of living is greater than what we are seeing here potentially for a raise, and we know that our scale is low, we can't call ourselves market competitive, it's going to make my job really tough, and it's going to make it really tough to keep staff. So again, it's not sensationalism, it's reality. So the 2.25, I don't think is lighting the world on fire by any means, looking at what our neighboring communities have done. We're right in the ballpark, and we have a scale that's lower. So I really caution if we're going to go at 1%, what we're doing. And where do we go from here? Pay for performance really doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot if you have a scale that's not even in market.
Anybody else have any thoughts? Otherwise, go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, and I think that's why we developed the market study, was to get us there, because we were way out of whack.
That's right. We're not corrected yet. We have the scale, but we're not corrected.
Well, we have no money to pay people to get to the scale. That's
We have
the
a balanced budget, but we have 2 extra requests that they're important.
Right. But you're gonna come in for that scale to get people back up. We have no money. You can do that all you want, but if there's no money there, they're just gonna be disappointed. I don't know, you're putting the onus on us that we're the bad people. We're working with the same budget you are. We're trying to satisfy people, and I'm tired of being portrayed as the bad people when we're trying to work with it too. We're trying to satisfy all different departments.
I've been holding off saying this, but I think it's really important. Regina, you had made the comment, I don't know where staff feels that way. And staff heard it on TV when the union contract was going through. The comment was made, you guys can go back and watch it. Yes, 2.25 makes sense for sworn officers. They have a difficult position, quote unquote. I don't know if the rest of the staff deserves that. That set the stage. Employees are watching, employees are listening. And that's where it started.
Absolutely heard that.
So, and I'm not referring to you. You guys can go back and watch it. It's on tape. And staff heard it, and immediately comments started. So we're not going to get 2.25 because we're not sworn officers, we're not union represented, we don't deserve it. So that's what we're up against. And what they're asking for is, they're not asking for the 2.25. I'm coming to you saying we need to give them 2.25. This is what keeps us competitive. I can't say I'm going to be able to retain a lot of staff at 1%. Jobs are becoming aplenty. And there's no golden handcuffs here anymore. So 2.25, I understand that we've got other requests on the floor. We've got to figure something out.
That's all I'm asking. I don't want to put staff against staff, but I'm hearing demands and public safety issues and, yes, I wish we had more money. That's why we're asking all of you where we can come up with it so we can have a balanced budget that satisfies all the needs. And I don't know where,
You can only go to the well so many times, and I haven't been here as long as the rest of the group. But I know with my budget and trimming every year, there's nothing left.
I have to echo what Rodney shared, is that we have looked at supply line items, we have looked at ad budgets, we have looked at, our continuing ed funds for our staff are at minimal standards. Speaking of standards, we're looking at, approaching our 5th national accreditation. So we're going to be going through 9 standards of what we should be held at as a national standard for what we do as a senior center. We have emergency services, but we also have essential services for our community to be well, to be participating in our community, everybody. So when we look at that whole budget, for us to say, how can we find $80,000? I can tell you it equals people in my department. If you ask me to cut 5% of what my budget is, you're talking about people. So it's very difficult. I completely understand that we have needs in our community, but I think it's important to look at the whole service that we provide as a city. Is obviously there are emergency services, but I said there are essential services, and my department's one of those.
I will say from a public works standpoint, we do look at the budget every year and look at our costs. Now we can potentially cut costs and save on different things that we do. And we're at a point where we're static. We've been presenting a static budget since I've been here, and probably before that too. At a certain point, static isn't good enough either. we have to look at your services as well. On the CIP standpoint, the capital standpoint, this year we cut over $350,000 in items that we're slated for replacement. And so we take a conscious look at all of our costs. And I think do a pretty good job of looking at what's needed to provide the necessary services for the city. So, and also from if the council does choose to lower the rate or the percentage for employees, that will affect morale. And so I just want you to seriously think about that as you move forward. It's going to have some impacts. So.
One of the things that Chief Wagner talked about at the last meeting was how many dollars his department would have to spend if it was funded by full-time paid personnel. Our department alone would cost over $500,000. We make it happen with $126,000 in stipends. I'm not diminishing any other department, but I'll tell you what, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time to keep people volunteering in order to recognize that savings. So I don't have the answer either. I don't have pots of money, but I will tell you that our department does attempt to foster, retain, understanding the financial impact that what these volunteers do affects the city. And it's work. So I don't have any magic answers either, but there is some definitive savings.
Mr. Chairman, the reason I asked the question is because I knew that there was no staff going to come up and say that we have money somewhere. I know that. I appreciate everything the staff, our department heads, our staff, the whole city. They're great. They do a great job. Everybody does a great job. There's no bad guys sitting in this room, Regina. The bad guy's sitting in the governor's office. That's the problem. And I'm not being nasty at you, Regina. I'm just saying.
Yes, you are.
The problem is the way the state funds or allows funding for municipalities and for school districts. That's the bottom line. You know, we might as well just pass the budget here and move on into next year. Hopefully we can do something legislatively or something, or elect the right people to offices that are going to do the job for us.
Go ahead.
Well, all I'm going to say is, you know, I'm sitting here listening to everybody, and I mean, I have a huge need, and you know, if you can do it, I'd love it. I will make use of anything that you can do to help us. But when I have to look to what I have to cut in order to get something, there isn't anything left for me to cut. I'm already deferring capital items. We're pushing them out. If we don't absolutely positively need it, we don't get it. So capital items and people aren't the same thing. I need people to operate my capital equipment that is expensive, and I can't help that. All I can do is offer the council good luck. I don't know. I'm expressing the need, and that's all that I can do. I can't charge anybody for my services. I'm at your will.
Go ahead, Chief.
Just to echo what everybody else has said, I'm in total agreement with that. And I'll go back to what I originally said earlier in the meeting is that we can't finance new positions on the back of current employees. And no matter how much we want to find savings, I mean, we've been going through this for years, and we've been scrubbing our budgets for years. And there really isn't any wiggle room left in our budgets anywhere. And if you look at our comparable neighbors, for whatever reason, we're always lower than everybody else around us. And it's because we have been so frugal in the past, and we are paying that price under the current system that we're in right now. I will differ a little bit with the the chair on what he said about referendums. I think it has to be driven from the council. When it comes to a public safety, public works, or a municipal referendum, they're unusual. They haven't occurred very often around the state. Everybody's scared of them. But I think when you lay stuff out to the public and let them know exactly what Alderperson Hirsch was saying, there is no money to do the things we need to do, and until we get caught up with the growth, how do you get there? And if we as a whole community aren't proactive about this stuff, next year's just going to be just as bad. And I mean, I work with our State Chiefs Association. We were floating around an idea about a public safety exemption in the revenue caps around the Capitol, and I'll tell you, both sides of the aisle didn't want to listen to any of that, because both sides of the aisle will say the same thing. You have a mechanism. It's called referendum. Let the public decide what they want to do. And if the public decides they don't want to spend the money on public safety, well, then in the future we'll have to look at cutting services. That's where we're going. My opinion, but I think it's pretty valid. I think that we're between the proverbial rock and a hard place right now on the budget, and the only way to get there is to figure out a different strategy to go there. And we know we're not going to get there in 18. Maybe there's a chance for 19. Maybe there's a chance to redirect this thing for 19. But it's going to take everybody working together. It's going to take staff working at trying to sell the ideas that we need to justify the cost, to justify the expansion. But unless we start going there, 2019 is going to be just as bad as 2018. And like we've been seeing for the last 7 or 8 years, it's all the same. It's how much more can we scrub or eke out. And so we don't make any progress, we spin our wheels.
We certainly do appreciate everything that we do get from you guys, and in our department, we feel like we're adequate for where we're at. And over the years, we haven't grown. We have 3 full-time people. One of them is mostly paid through grants. We've been able to, by being more efficient, raise more revenues without raising prices on kids. Sponsorships has been big. So we've been able to kind of maintain the, as prices go up, we've been able to maintain by growing our revenues. And so that's just the best that we can do. If we were to take away anything that we are, we would lose more revenues, and it would actually just make the gap bigger. Also, I really have a superstar in our department, and he gets better every day. And when he hears the things that we've been talking about tonight, and I really would hate to see our city lose him over decisions made like that. I mean, I'm not going to be here forever, but he could be here for a long time, and our city would be really beneficial to be able to keep him, especially with some of the great things that we're working on that could actually help the city grow, and he's really pivotal to that. So I just wanted to share that. Thanks.
I have Alderperson Kittleson.
Thank you. I seconded Regina's for the simple reason is it's not that I don't value the city employees, but I think as you were saying earlier, President Swadley, is that we need to have discussions like this. We need people to come up forward and really lay down what it is they do and how important it is. And I will echo with Police Chief Leck that sometimes we need to force the card. And we're at that point now to force the card. I don't want to move forward with any of this budget stuff until we get some of the information that you had asked for. How does the development that we have now, how is that going to help us out in the near future? Is it or is it not going to help us? Are we going to be more between the rock and a hard place? One question I would have would be the Opera House Fund. Can you tell me what does the $171,000 actually go for? Is that the number that you said we give to the Opera House?
Yes, two employees, their wages and benefits.
Okay. How long has the Opera House been in existence?
I don't know.
2001, I helped under Mayor Bob Barnett reopen the Opera House after being closed.
So wouldn't we think after, this is just my perspective, after listening to records always being set with attendance and attendance and attendance, wouldn't you think that that should self-fund itself by now?
I'll tell you that our Opera House is one of, and Bill will say it louder than I can, it's one of our biggest economic engines that we have in the city of Stoughton. The Opera House brings folks into the community every time there's a show, and they eat at the local restaurants, they go to the local pubs. It's what brings people here. I see them coming early in the afternoon for the show that evening. So for the
171.
$171,000, to me, that's a big economic, that's a price that a city should pay for economic development. Bringing folks in, they see our community, sometimes they're going to come, well, sometimes, they often come back show after show to spend more money in our community, to the downtown merchants, and then sometimes they even move here. But I think it's well worth that amount of, my opinion, well worth that amount of money.
They gave you your time, now it's the agree to disagree.
Sure, absolutely.
I would say that the people that keep coming back, they already know it's established. They know the restaurants we have. They know everything that goes on about it. And I do know some people that have, like, in different cities that have this stuff. I just find $171,000. I would think that there's ways to possibly trim that back, to possibly give us some money here, flexibility to go with. You know, that's always something to look at. I mean, if we're talking about different ways to try to get money to see how things move forward in the future, that would be one approach I would ask for.
I'm going to say as little as I can, because,
Lisa, you have that dog collar?
yeah, do you have the shot color? I married the Opera House. I accidentally married a building instead of a person. And so when I go home at night, the Opera House doesn't make me dinner or anything like that. So, I poured my heart and soul into the Opera House. There's businesses up and down Main Street that when we get to September or October, they're wondering, when are your shows going to start? I would invite you to talk to the merchants on Main Street about the difference between before the Opera House was doing what it is now versus what it was before. If the doors, and what we're doing at the Opera House for a staff of 3 is something that if you go to a comparable facility, they have a staff of, say, 13. If you look at the schedules that they're putting together, it's nothing. I get a call at least once a month from another community that's trying to duplicate what we did. And there's no recipe for doing it. It was kind of a happy accident. By virtue of the persistence of some eccentric characters in this community, which is still a common characteristic of Stoughton, the job got done. I get people who come into the Opera House every single day. I have at least a dozen people who are personally responsible for the entire restoration project having occurred, who come in and let me know that with their families. So there's a lot of different people who are responsible, but I mean, the idea that $170,000, 18% of the revenues that we're bringing in is a large price to pay when you have to make choices. I mean, if you have to choose to cut off your foot or not, I would say don't cut off your foot. Examine some of your other options. The whole notion that we can take away 2.25% of a raise, I mean, I hesitate to take off my shoe just to point out that, my sole's peeling off of it, 2.25%, I think it's $20 a week for me is what it would come out to. And I'm pretty well compensated. I don't, need that $20 a week. I can get by on what I got. But you can't put that 2.25 in some sort of bucket and save it up until you have enough money to pay for an employee. We're at a dead end because this is Scott Walker's Wisconsin. This is what it looks like. We're eating our own tails. The idea that the Opera House is like a meaty little target is ridiculous, because as soon as the Opera House is gone, you're going to have at least 4 businesses on Main Street gone. And then you got to ask yourself, why are people moving to town? Why do they even want to come here? And then the rec department is next, the senior center is next, and before you know it, you got nothing left. This is Scott Walker's Wisconsin. We're sitting here beating each other up when we all agree with each other.
Thanks, Bill.
It's not my place to call on you, Dennis.
Thank you, Bill.
First of all, I'm not attacking the Opera House, and I didn't say that that should go away. I understand the time and effort it took for people to put all of that together.
I don't think you do.
All I'm asking, pardon me?
I don't think that you do.
Well, first of all, let's have this as a candid discussion. We're here as the committee of the whole, and we're looking at different ways of possible saving money. Did I say we should take the money away? All I asked for is, can we look at that for what the cost of that is? That's all I asked for. I didn't say take it away. And the second thing I would like to say is, we're the city of Stoughton, and even though none of us or either agree or disagree with the state government, that shouldn't come into play here. We've got to figure out what we got to do for ourselves. So I would just like to direct that attention there. And first of all, I didn't say take it away. I just asked for us to review it. That's all I asked. Just like we've asked every other department to do, is to review the money given to them. That's all we've asked.
Well, I hear you.
Tell Bill.
Guys, we have an amendment on the table, so we should probably
Shot
stick to
collar.
that,
Shot color.
unless you want to make another amendment.
Can I just say one last thing, and I know you guys, I just feel like with the Opera House, as much as with anything else, if you talk about taking any money out of any one department, it ripples throughout the entire community. So it goes well beyond $170,000 in my case, or whatever it is for the senior center, or whatever it is for the library. It's a ripple effect. So think big, don't think $170,000.
That's what we're trying to do.
Thanks for your passion. Bill's got lots of passion. Thank you, Bill.
We all do. I mean, that's why we're here. So, we have an amendment on the table. Is there any more discussion on the amendment?
Could you read it, please? See if we're gonna...
So I have the amendment to amend the budget to include a full-time staff person for police and fire to be hired in June of 2018, and to change the staff wage increase from 2.25% to 1%.
Any more discussion on that? Otherwise, we'll vote on that. Can we do a roll call, please? Thank you.
Hirsch.
Aye.
Kittleson.
Aye.
Swadley.
No.
Engelberger.
No.
Jensen.
No.
O'Connor.
No.
Bartlett.
No.
Wilson.
No.
That motion fails on a vote of 2 to 6.
Are there any other amendments? Otherwise, we'll go back to the main motion. And the main motion is to recommend.
To approve the general fund budget and all city special fund budgets as presented and refer to council for consideration.
And if there's anything that you need between now and when it's on the council agenda, please reach out to the mayor or staff and you'll receive it. Alderperson Engelberger.
Thank you. I'm going to support it. I don't think there's a lot we can do. I mean, we can look at a referendum possibly, but it's a little too late for this year. But not sure where else we can scrape up some money, so I'm going to support it.
Anybody else? Alderperson Hirsch.
I guess I can't support it because we're kicking the problem down the road a year, and it just, we have to figure out, and I don't want people to think that I'm attacking them. I'm just trying to work with you to try to figure out that we can satisfy as many people as possible and consider public safety and honor our staff with the limited budget. And I think we can still figure something out. And maybe, you know, I just don't feel right, because next we're going to have a bigger problem. Because we're going to have staff that wants more pay increase, and we still have the fire and the police. We can't afford it all, so we need to start figuring something out now.
Alderperson Kittleson, did you have something?
Yeah, I would prefer that we didn't vote for this here. We have too many other alders that are missing for conversation's sake to try to figure out some other way to do it. I totally understand that they're all excused. We have enough here for it, but I just can't go with this.
So I think now would be a time to talk about the timeline. I mean, this is a recommendation to council, which I'm not sure which meeting the plan was to actually vote on at that council.
It'd be the next, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Public hearing is scheduled for November 14th. So that's when you would vote to approve, hopefully, the budget that evening.
On November 14th?
Right. You
Okay.
did have a workshop scheduled for the 26th, but if this goes forward, I don't think there's a reason that you would need a workshop, but that would be up to you.
Yeah, I mean, we could have it, but I'm not really sure what we would accomplish. I mean, certainly between now and when it comes to council, if there's any additional information that we need or ideas that you come up with to generate the type of resources needed to fund the positions, you can always make an amendment at council as well. Go ahead.
This was the same thing last year we did this. And it's the same thing, I would assume, the year before, the year before,
It's
the
like
year before.
Groundhog Day, isn't it?
Yeah, so why wouldn't we get the information that you requested to see how these other, the development is gonna either help
Well,
us
I
or
would
not
still
help us?
expect that information for the council meeting.
But I mean, that's part of the issue that we do get, President Swadley, is that you'll ask for this stuff, and don't take this wrong, but we get the stuff the day of for information for us to kind of go through, and it's no different than the email we received today at 3:29. I believe it was. Was it 3:29 or 3:09?
Could be.
You know, I mean, there's a lot of that stuff. Everybody here, we all have jobs, just like all of you guys have jobs. And it's hard to just sit here and wait for your emails to come, and then, oh geez, now we got to figure out this, and then we got to decide stuff, you know, 11th hour
We
or
do have a
whatever.
month before we're gonna vote on it, so I think that helps. And I think, I felt that staff did a good job of accommodating my request, because I only made it, yesterday? So,
Yeah,
I think that if you have any other questions, the sooner you can get them out there, the sooner we can get answers to them, including the ones that I raised tonight. I think by the time we vote on it, we'll have the information we need. And if you want to talk about it between now and then, we can always, have another meeting or put it on the council agenda before then if we have to. But, I mean, at this point, I don't know what's left to discuss tonight. Did you have your hand up?
No, that's fine, go ahead.
Well, I'm not necessarily thinking it's what's left to discuss for tonight, but what's left for discuss for possibility of the next year coming up. Because all of this is going to flow into it. We know that we're going to have the police chief's going to ask, the fire's going to ask, EMS might ask. So now instead of being reactive, I think it would be more beneficial for us to be a little proactive, to look at what is possibly for the 2019 and so forth, instead of just waiting for the month of October to throw all of these together and decide through. That's my only question. I don't know.
Go ahead.
Well, my only concern is that you have 5 elders here that have no idea what we've discussed, and on November 14th, they're gonna come in, and how are they gonna make a educated and good decision unless we somehow have another meeting or another maybe council of the whole meeting right after public hearing or something, because it seems like 5 people is a lot that isn't up to date on what's going on.
Yeah, Council President Swadley talked about getting these dates out during the reorg. And that's a great idea, but we have to acknowledge that every October is when we do budget. And I get it, because everybody's busy and these nights are precious. Certainly I get that. I've got meetings 3 or 4 nights a week too, so nights are precious. But we know that October is budget time. It's being recorded, so alders as well as folks at home, I beg of you to watch the meeting, hear the questions that are being asked, because we've had some great discussions tonight. Listen to them, get back to us if you have questions, and we can get those answers to you. As always, with the committee of the whole, this is a recommendation to council. So there's always that opportunity, again, to have further discussion at the council. And again, the public hearing is November 14th.
And we could certainly, depending on how the next council agenda looks, if it's like it was the other night, we could have a committee of the whole afterward. But I don't know what's going to be on the agenda yet. So, I mean, that's something else we can consider. So at least then, people wouldn't have to commit to another night. Most of us will already be there, so that's something else that we could consider as we get closer to the next council meeting. Okay, so any more discussion? Otherwise, we can vote on the motion. We can do a roll call on that. Do you want to read it one more time? It's just basically as is, right?
Right, so motion by O'Connor to approve the general fund budget and all city special fund budgets as presented and refer to council for consideration, with a second by Jensen. You want a roll call?
Sure.
Okay. Kittleson.
No.
Swadley.
Aye.
Engelberger.
Aye.
Jensen.
Aye.
O'Connor.
Aye.
Bartlett.
Aye.
Hirsch.
No.
Olson.
Aye.
That motion carries on a vote of 6-2.
Okay, and the next item on there was the future agenda items or optional meeting dates. Is there any interest in setting something up, or should we just go to the last item?
It's hard to set it up when you have 5 people missing.
Okay, so then we can,
Possible, like you said, committee of the whole after.
yeah, we'll try to do that if it works out.
Move to adjourn?
So motion to adjourn, is there a second? Oh, put your hand up.
Just a quick question. Are we canceling the meeting then on the 26th?
I
Yes?
believe so.
Okay, just wanted to verify. Thanks.
Okay, so I had a motion by Jensen. Was there a second? Did I hear O'Connor to adjourn? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Roll call.
None opposed?